Adolescence. What a wild ride, right? It's this incredible transformation that almost everyone goes through. But it's not random. It's all driven by this hidden biological blueprint. So, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the actual science behind this journey. Ready? Let's dive in.
I mean, it's a time of growing like a weed, feeling all sorts of big emotions, and asking a ton of questions. So, what is actually going on inside our bodies and brains to kick off all these changes? That's the big question we're really going to get into today.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this in 5 parts. First, we'll look at the hormones, the why behind everything. Then, we'll get into the visible changes you can see. After that, we'll explore how the reproductive system wakes up, what you need to eat to fuel all this growth, and finally, we'll bust some pretty common myths you've probably heard.
Okay, first stop the biological starting gun. You see, to really get what adolescence is all about, we have to go right back to the beginning. It all starts with this tiny but super powerful chemical signal deep inside your brain.
So let me introduce you to the pituitary gland. Seriously, this thing is only about the size of a pea, but don't let that fool you. They call it the master gland for a really good reason. It's kind of like the starter pistol at a race. It fires off the first shot of hormones that gets the whole process moving. So how does this actually work? Well, think of it like a 3-step chain reaction. Step 1, the brain sends out the signal. Step 2, the pituitary gland responds by releasing these things called gonadotropins. You can just think of them as the green light hormones. And then step 3, these hormones zoom through the body and flip the on switch for either the ovaries in girls or the testes in boys. And once those glands get the green light, wow, things really start to happen. For boys, the testes start pumping out testosterone, and that's what leads to things like a deeper voice and facial hair. For girls, the ovaries start producing estrogen, and that's the hormone behind breast development and getting the menstrual cycle started. Okay, which brings us to our second section, all those visible signs of change. You know, those hormones aren't just working their magic on the inside, they create a whole bunch of changes on the outside, too. The scientific name for these is secondary sexual characteristics, which is just a fancy way of saying the physical traits that show up but aren't directly involved in making babies. And what's really interesting is that some of the first changes you see are actually something everyone goes through. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. Puberty means you'll start noticing hair growing under your arms and in your pubic region. It's a totally shared experience. But from that point, the paths start to split a bit. For males, the larynx, that's your voice box, gets bigger, which is what creates an Adam's apple. Their chest also gets broader and muscles start to develop more. For females, the pelvic region widens out, which is the body's way of preparing for possibly having a baby one day, and the mammary glands inside the breasts begin to develop. All right, so all this leads us right into section 3, where we're going to take a closer look at the reproductive system itself. Because beyond everything you can see on the outside, some of the most amazing changes are happening deep inside as these systems, wake up and come online. For females, this whole awakening process often starts with what's called menarche. That's the very first menstrual period. This is the start of a regular cycle that usually lasts around 28 to 30 days. So it starts with a period, then around the middle of the cycle an egg gets released, that's called ovulation, and then the body just gets ready to do it all over again. So you might be wondering, what exactly is menstruation? Well, that's pretty simple actually. Every month, the uterus builds up this cozy, thick lining, just in case a fertilized egg needs a place to settle in and grow. But if an egg doesn't get fertilized, well, the body doesn't need that lining anymore, so it sheds it. The most important thing to remember here is that this is a totally natural, totally healthy sign that the body is working just the way it's supposed to. This all brings up a really cool biological puzzle. How is a baby's biological sex determined in the first place? It's a huge question, but the answer actually comes down to something incredibly tiny. The secret is in our chromosomes. See, pretty much every cell in our body has 23 pairs of them, but there's one special pair that holds the code for our biological sex. It works like this. Females have 2 X chromosomes, so XX, and males have 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, so XY. And here's the kicker, the deciding factor. The female egg always has an X chromosome. It's the sperm that can carry either an X or a Y. So the sperm is what biologically determines the sex of the baby. If a sperm with an X chromosome meets the egg, you get XX, a female. If a sperm with a Y chromosome gets there, you get XY, a male. Simple as that. Okay, let's move on to section 4, fueling your growth.
Think about it. With all this massive biological construction happening, your body is like a building site. It needs the right materials to get the job done. So let's look at the owner's manual for feeding your body during all this change. Let's focus on 3 super important nutrients. First up, iron. Iron is absolutely essential for making blood, which is like the delivery service for oxygen and energy all over your body. And it's especially important for girls who are menstruating. Next, calcium. This is huge. Your bones are growing so fast right now, and calcium is the main building block. You're literally building the skeleton you'll have for the rest of your life. And lastly, iodine. This one helps your thyroid gland, which is like the thermostat for your body, regulating your metabolism and overall growth.
All right, we've made it to our final section, myths versus facts. You know, there are so many myths and just plain wrong ideas floating around about adolescence. So let's bust 2 of the biggest ones right now.
Okay, myth number 1. I'm sure you've heard this one before. You shouldn't exercise when you have your period. It's often treated like a sick day, right? Well, here's the fact. The exact opposite can be true. A little bit of light exercise, like going for a walk or doing some stretching, can actually help. It gets your blood flowing and releases endorphins. Those are your body's natural painkillers, which can really help with cramps.
And here's another really big one, and this myth causes so much stress for people, the idea that pimples are just because you're unclean or have a dirty face.
The fact is, acne is almost entirely an internal thing. Remember those hormones we talked about at the very beginning? Well, they're the culprit. They make the oil glands in your skin go into overdrive, and that can clog up your pores. So yeah, washing your face is a good idea, but blaming acne on just being dirty completely misses the real hormonal reason it's happening.
So, as we bring this all together, it's so important to remember that adolescence is so much more than just getting taller or your voice changing. It's this amazing biological and emotional bridge that every single one of us crosses. It's the journey from being cared for to becoming someone who can care for others. It really is just an incredible journey of transformation. Now that we've peeked behind the curtain at the science of it all, I'm curious, what part of this whole journey are you most curious about now?